I think there's some good evidence that suggests that the Fair Play for Cuba Committee was used by the Cuban government in order to assassinate John Kennedy. Now, don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that the CIA and the Secret Service and that crowd weren't involved, and the Dallas police. But what I'm saying is I think there was a Cuban plot, a Castro plot, to kill Kennedy. Probably American intelligence knew about it all along, and they used it for their purposes. That's what I think. But in this video, I'm going to concentrate on the Fair Play for Cuba Committee and how it seems implicated to me.
The New Orleans chapter of Fair Play for Cuba was manned by an ex-Marine named Lee Harvey Oswald. He was the only member of the chapter, and he was filmed passing out pro-Cuba literature on the streets.
So, we all know that Lee Harvey Oswald was involved with the Fair Play for Cuba Committee in the summer of 1963, but I think there's evidence that he was involved prior to that, and that his involvement went deeper than handing out flyers. As I showed in my video about Richard Gibson, there was this letter here that the envelope was found at 1026 North Beckley after the assassination by the Dallas police, and it's got a cancellation date on it in August of 1962, which is a year before Oswald's New Orleans activity that we know about. So his relationship with the Fair Play for Cuba Committee went back further than the official story says. And as I also went over in the Gibson video, the Richard Gibson video, the CIA, through the Swiss police, intercepted a phone call between Gibson and some unknown person, and the conversation was in French, and this was the day after the assassination. And in that phone call, Richard Gibson said of Oswald, yes, but Oswald is a fellow who was called to my attention 2 years ago because he was arrested for shouting "Long live Fidel" in the streets of Dallas. So he's talking about Oswald going back to 1961, which was a time when he was supposed to be in the Soviet Union. Maybe he's got the time wrong, but certainly this implies the relationship goes back further than the official story tells us. And then he talks about having destroyed all of his correspondence with Oswald, so there's nothing to worry about. I think this implies that there's something beyond merely handing out leaflets going on. And it's also well known that the Fair Play for Cuba Committee was funded, at least in part, in a large part, by the Cuban government. So if Castro wanted to use the Fair Play for Cuba Committee for something, he probably could do it. And now I'm going to introduce Vincent T Lee here. There he is. He became the director of the national director for the Fair Play for Cuba Committee after Richard Gibson had suddenly left his post. Richard Gibson was in charge of the Fair Play for Cuba Committee before this. And Gibson left suddenly at about the time of that envelope, the last communication he had with Oswald that we can assume was by him, because that letter was sent at the time that he was in charge. But anyway, Vincent T Lee took over, and I'm introducing him now because he is known by the next character, Elizabeth Catlett Mora. Betty Mora, I'll call her. There are various documents about her. This one from April 10th from the FBI. She's not very well known, so I'm going to read some of this. A confidential source who has furnished reliable information in the past advised on December 6, 1963, that Elizabeth Catlett Mora, also known as Betty Mora, was very upset and excited over the involvement of Lee Harvey Oswald as the reported assassin of President John F. Kennedy. Mora had made a statement indicating that the Communist Party of Mexico was very interested in obtaining all the information available concerning Oswald's travel to Mexico, and particularly as to how much American authorities knew about this. No confirmation has been received from any other sources concerning this as of April 1, 1964. Mora had stated that Oswald could be linked to Mexico only through his activities before his trip to the Soviet Union. Mora was very interested in obtaining information concerning the date that Oswald departed for Russia. Mora stated that she considered it terribly important to have any press references to Oswald's activities in New Orleans, Louisiana, before he went to Russia. She added that if something regarding Oswald's activities at that time appeared in the press, it could blow the lid off and we could all get fried. Mora stated she could not understand why the investigation of Oswald, as reported in the press, had not focused on New Orleans, Louisiana, instead of Dallas, Texas. Mora stated that Oswald was well known in Russia among the Americans who were there at the same time he was. Mora said she believed he was not that much of a nut, meaning that he could not have undertaken singly to assassinate President Kennedy. Mora did state that one Mary Louise Patterson, also known as Mary Lou Patterson, who presently resides in the Soviet Union and is attending the Friendship School there, knew Oswald while he was in Russia. All right, I'm going to stop there. This shows that Elizabeth Betty Mora, who knows, we'll get to it later, but she knows Vincent T Lee, or has met him at least, and she knows about the Fair Play for Cuba Committee. It shows that this, according to her, there's a completely different story about Oswald that we don't know about. And I think this is very supportive of the idea that there were two people calling themselves Oswald, and that one was in Russia and one was not in Russia. And in this document, the CIA document, February 10th, 1964, their source mentions specifically about that Betty Mora is interested in the Fair Play for Cuba Committee and Oswald here. Concentrate on Betty Mora to endeavor to find out any additional information which she may have regarding Oswald and his activities on behalf of the Fair Play for Cuba Committee in New Orleans, Louisiana, prior to the assassination. So this shows the CIA is interested in knowing what Betty Mora knows. And to finish up on Betty Mora for now, this April 6, 1964 document says, on 3/22/64, the informants ascertained that Elizabeth Mora had now started giving out the current party line in the story regarding the Lee Harvey Oswald case. She indicated that she believed now that Oswald was an oddball who probably was collaborating with Jack Ruby and the police officer Oswald was said to have killed. She claims that police officer Tippett was in Ruby's nightclub with Oswald a few nights prior to the shooting. So she has changed her tune, and she is stating the party line now. And the next character I want to introduce is Gilberto Lopez. That's this handsome young fella here. November 20, 1963. This is an FBI document, I think. Lopez attended a Fair Play for Cuba Committee meeting in Tampa, Florida, at the time that at that time he was expecting a call from Cuba in order to get word on his departure for Cuba. So 2 days before the assassination, Lopez is at a Fair Play for Cuba Committee and waiting for a call from Cuba. November 20th, he received a Mexico tourist card for 15 days, so he gets his Mexico tourist visa on the same day. On November 23rd, the day after the assassination, Lopez crossed the border into Mexico. And according to Enrique Ruiz Montalvo, agent of the Federal Judicial Police, one Gilberto Lopez was involved with the assassination of President Kennedy. And it doesn't say how he knows that. And then he went to the Cuban embassy on November 27th, and he departed on a flight for Havana on that same day. And it doesn't say so here, but other documents say that he was the only passenger on the plane with a crew of 9. So while you could not convict Lopez in a court of law for being a conspirator to murder the president, it looks very, very much like he might have been Oswald's escort to take him back to Cuba, only Oswald wasn't available, so he just kept on going. That's my speculation about that. But anyway, it shows, once again, we have a Fair Play for Cuba Committee involved individual, apparently active in some kind of business that goes beyond handing out flyers. And now we move on to the Havana Coincidence. The first character in this part of the story is Vincent Lee. Vincent T Lee, the director, the national director of the Fair Play for Cuba Committee, went to Havana and was there from December 28, 1962 until January 21st, 1963. And Betty Mora also went to Cuba at this time. She left on December 30th and came back on January 21st on the same airplane as Vincent T Lee. And I'll also read this. Betty Mora and her husband are really frightened because they both believe Lee and Oswald, they mean Vincent T Lee and Oswald, had close relationship, and probably Lee in on planning of Oswald assassination of President Kennedy. We don't know why they think this, but she just came back from Havana, and she thinks that Vincent T Lee and Lee Harvey Oswald have a close relationship, and that they planned to kill JFK. And it gets better. This is Warren Commission Exhibit 324, a postcard that Lee Harvey Oswald sent his brother Robert on January 10th. Dear Robert, sorry I took so long in saying thank you for the Christmas present you sent June. I was out of town for a few days, so I didn't hear about it until after Christmas. This is Christmas of 1962. This is the same time that Vincent T Lee and Elizabeth Mora went to Havana. And so one would have to assume that sometime between Christmas and January 10th, Lee Harvey Oswald, who has no money, was out of town for a few days. Did he go to Havana? And this is the J. Edgar Hoover memo of November 22nd, 1963, on the day of the assassination. He says, the Attorney General asked if Oswald is a communist. I said that he is not a communist, but has communist leanings. I related that Oswald went to Russia and stayed there 3 years, came back to the United States in June 1962, and went to Cuba on several occasions, but would not tell us what he went to Cuba for. So here we have J. Edgar Hoover telling Robert Kennedy that Lee Harvey Oswald had gone to Cuba several times since 1962. Did Oswald go to Cuba for those few days that he was out of town and meet with Vincent T. Lee? I don't know, but I think he probably did. And then there's Jack. We all know when he talked to Mr. Wade at the midnight press conference, he knew all about the Fair Play for Cuba Committee. And we have documents which relate an unconfirmed story that Jack Ruby was also in Havana at the same time. Just another coincidence? So Vincent Lee was in Havana from December 28, 1962 through January 21st, 1963, at the same time that Jack Ruby was allegedly in Havana, and at the same time that Lee Harvey Oswald had been out of town for a few days. So I think there's ample evidence here to suggest that there was a Cuban plot, and that Oswald and Vincent T. Lee and even Jack Ruby might have been involved, and that I think probably Jack Ruby is a key man here. I couldn't find the quote, but he said something about being able to play both sides in Cuba, and he might have been a double agent. He might have been working for American intelligence while the Cubans thought that he was working for them.